As an educator, it's always my goal to help students overcome technical barriers so that they can get to creating the music they want to make faster, which is why I put together a bunch of Ableton Live racks which are designed to do just that. It's called the Simple Bundle, and it's a collection of over 30 Ableton Live racks that work in any edition of Ableton Live 12, from Light all the way through to Suite. So no matter what edition of Ableton Live you have access to, you can use these devices. There's a whole bunch of audio effect racks, instrument racks, and MIDI effect racks that are designed to help you make music quicker. You'll find links down below to check it out, but what I want to do in this video is just show you through how a few of these different racks work and how you might be able to use them in your own productions. Let's dive right in and take a look. Let's take a look at the audio effect racks first. So to demonstrate some of these devices here, I've got just a little 8-bar loop, which is a little bit bare bones, but it will work for the purposes of demonstration. So let's use some of these simple audio racks to kind of add a little bit more interest to this loop. So I'm gonna go to the vocal chops here and let's go to the simple creative effects. First up, the simple doubler is a great way to kind of create a pseudo doubling effect. If I just add this to the vocal chops track, here we can increase the gain of the double and adjust some of the other parameters as well. Kind of this cool widening effect. Next, I want to add a little bit more space to these vocals. So I'm going to go to the simple space creative effects rack here and add this to the track. And this is basically an all-in-one rack that allows you to add up to 5 different spatial effects to a single track. And this is really great for being able to create kind of more complex sounding spaces. For instance, we can increase the amount of slapback. We can reduce the distance of the slapback. Now we can add up to 3 different types of reverbs at varying levels. Let's introduce, say, this room. I'm going to turn down this doubler just a little bit. Let's change the room size here, which adjusts some certain parameters of the reverb just with one macro. Now let's add some more reverb with the whole and the long. Let's make this long really big and kind of reduce the level or the size of the whole. Let's also introduce some rhythm with the delay send here. And you'll also notice that each of the controls in each of these racks do have associated info text, which means that if you hover over any of these different controls here and take a look over in the info view on the left, we can see that we have a bit of information that tells you certain things about this parameter. In the case of the delay time, this is quite useful because it tells you the ranges of the parameter and how they are associated to different rhythmic values. So for instance, I want a quarter note delay, so I can set this to 46, and now we should have a quarter note delay. And now, because this is getting quite busy, but I do like the effect of it, I can just increase the ducking amount here, which will reduce the level of all of the spatial effects whilst the dry signal is happening. Let's take a look now at one of the other ones. So let's go to this drums group here, which sounds like this. And I want to add just a little bit of warmth and character to these drums. So I'm going to add this MTM simple warmth. And you can see this is just a single knob. And basically all this does is just add a little bit of subtle saturation and some filtering. It actually just uses the warmth control in the chorus, but it's just mapped to the macro control here, which makes it really easy to use without adding any chorusing effect. And the last thing that I might want to do here is just use this simple washout control on the main track. Let's put it before this limiter that I've got here. And this just basically allows us to create a bit of a washout style effect. Which is a lot of fun, and it's also worth noting that at 100%, this actually freezes the reverb that's embedded in this rack, which means that it'll just go on for eternity, which is actually pretty cool and pretty fun. Some of the other effects we've got here include the simple lo-fi, which basically just allows us to add some different lo-fi characteristics to a sound. A simple shifter, which allows us to apply both pitch and formant shifting using the new auto shift device. And a simple slapback, which is actually one you can grab for free that I've showcased in a previous video. I'll link that via the card above. Next up, let's take a look at some of the utility audio effect racks included in this bundle. For instance, here I've got a simple balance, which allows us to control the left and right volumes independently, as well as the left and right panning, which effectively gives us like a split stereo pan control, but as a rack as opposed to using the track panning. There's also a bunch of other simple devices in here. For instance, the simple channel strip is one that I might want to use on the drums. This is actually the same version of the channel strip that was included in my utility racks bundle, but now I've updated that one so that it's a little bit more fully featured, and it's one that I actually personally use. I'll do a video updating on that sometime soon. But here the channel strip is really good. We can just add some compression, maybe increase the high frequencies a little bit, reduce the lows, and add some soft clipping. There's also some things in here like a simple clipper, which just has soft and hard clipping and an input and output, a simple one knob compressor, which is super useful, and that's also the same one as included in the channel strip, a simple de-esser, which is fantastic for vocals, and then one that I use all the time is this simple filter. And this simple filter is really nice because it's basically just a high pass and a low pass combined into one, with the added benefit of when the high pass is all the way at the bottom, it's turned off, and when the low pass is all the way at the top, it's also turned off. And we also have access to the filter resonances and the filter slopes, which is basically all you need in this kind of device. Other things include a simple gain, which is really just a gain control with a maximum output of 0 and then a mute and unmute down the bottom. And then slightly more interesting is a simple parallel compressor, which uses the one knob compressor in parallel and then allows us to kind of increase some drive as well and then control the level of that compressor separately. Using the macro variations, we could just listen to the compressed output if we wanted to, and then hear what they sound like combined. Next up, let's take a look at some of the instrument racks that are included in this simple bundle. Now, when it came to the instrument racks, I didn't want to include like a bunch of specific presets for genres or anything like that, and I do plan on adding more instrument racks to this bundle, as well as more audio effect racks and MIDI effect racks too, but I did want to include instruments that were sounds that were kind of used a lot in most electronic music production styles. For instance, if we take a look at this bass instrument rack here, we have a simple 808, simple acid, simple FM bass, simple growl, and simple sub. So let's replace the simple sub on this sub track here with the original simple sub and take a listen to what it sounds like. It's literally just a sub bass. But what's nice about this is we have control over the second harmonic, kind of like giving the feel of it being saturated without it actually being saturated and distorted. We have a low pass filter, and then we have some amplitude controls in decay and sustain, as well as some pitch controls here down the bottom and an output control. And the pitch controls are really nice for being able to add just a little bit of extra punch to the start of the sub sound, which is particularly useful if you're kind of doing more of a rolling sub sound. Here we have a simple 808, which is similar but different to the sub sound, as this allows us to add some more kind of distortion characteristics to the sound instead of it just being a very simple plain sub bass. We have amplitude controls with the decay, pitch decay controls, some glide time because everyone loves those 808 slides. And then 3 different types of distortion, a more subtle one, noise, and then a really aggressive kind of fuzz distortion, which combining all 3, you can get some really cool characteristics. Next up is the simple acid. So I've gone ahead and created a little simple MIDI pattern here. Here we have the 4 kind of main controls of an acid machine. We have the cutoff, the resonance, the decay, and then the modulation amount. Next, we've got the ability to kind of change the waveform between saw and pulse. Then the oscillator shape here controls either the sync of the saw wave or the pulse width of the pulse wave. And this starts to be really cool when we introduce the ability to modulate the shape with the envelope. We have some high pass. And then this green section here is the section that allows us to have velocity modulate various parameters of the synthesizer. So here in this sequence, you can see we've got a bunch of velocity variation going on the different notes. And if I start to introduce some of these velocity to cutoff, velocity to resonance, decay, LPF mod, we can start to hear some more dynamic movement going on in this sound. Then we have some redux. and some drive. Next, let's take a look at the final two bass sounds, which are fairly similar. We have a simple FM bass. Again, basic envelope controls. FM amount. Ratio. Shape. Some filter cutoff and resonance. The ability to control the FM amount and the filter with an envelope. Some glide time again, and redux and drive, same as the simple acid sound. And then the simple growl uses a similar idea with FM, but is designed more for those kind of growly dubstep type bass sounds. Again, basic envelope controls here, low pass filter, FM ratio, amount. We have a high pass filter sweep, which adds a little bit of interesting movement. We have a thickening and chorus amount, and then a phaser for those kind of cool notchy movements. And then similar redux and drive controls, and output level for the sub bass, which is always useful to have on this kind of sound. So the basses do form the majority of the sounds in the instrument rack section, but there are a few other interesting and cool sounds. First up is the simple kick synth, which I'm actually using as the kick sound in this little loop. Let's load up the initialized version, and here we have some basic controls for the envelope, things like the length of the kick, attack, decay and release, and then some parameters that allow us to kind of control the knock or the initial transient of the kick drum. Things like the pitch amount, a click amount and rate, noise level and high pass. And because this is created in drift, it's also worth noting that the pitch of the sound does also follow the pitch of the incoming note. Then we've got some really basic EQ settings here, and then a drive, saturation, and a limiting just to top it all off. There is the simple noise sweep, which basically allows us to create just, you guessed it, a simple noise sweep. And if I just hold down a MIDI note, we can use the sweep parameter to basically just create a noise sweep. We can also introduce a phaser into the sound, which is also controlled by this sweep parameter. Here we have the simple riser, which allows us to create more of a tonal riser, where the sweep length is just controlled by this first macro knob here. So we could have a sweep of say 2 bars. And then we get the ability to change things like the oscillator waveform, low pass filter cutoff, resonance, and high pass, all of which can be modulated by the length of the sweep. And of course, the starting and ending pitch of the sound is determined by the note that you feed into this instrument. Then just to add a little bit more interest, we do have a thicken control and a chorus control. We have a simple sub drop, which is actually the exact same sub drop as I created in a previous video, which I'll link above, and you can also download this one for free if you'd like to try it out. Lastly, the final two instruments in the simple instrument racks are the simple Pluck, which is really useful for creating kind of Pluck style synth sounds. We can of course randomize this to get a really interesting sound. But we have access to basic controls such as decay, release, waveform and shaping, filter controls here, the click at the beginning of a sound, the level of the noise, and then things like stereo spread and the classic drift parameter, which is available in the drift synthesizer, which was of course used to create this sound. And finally, we have a simple Supersaw, which is a simplified version of my big Supersaw rack that's made in drift instead of using wavetable. We have basic envelope controls, attack, decay, sustain, release, basic filter controls, unison and drift controls, chorus for extra added width and detuning, drive, and then a pitch drop for that kind of classic Hoover style sound. Supersaws are again used in a lot of different styles of music, so I thought it was right to include one in this pack. Of course, all these different racks are designed to be used in a modular way, so just using, say, one of the instrument racks by itself is not necessarily what I intended. I recommend you try out using them with the effects racks and the MIDI effect racks, which I'll talk about now. Let's take a look at the simple Chords MIDI effect rack. And this one is really cool because it allows us to create chords with just a single note. And each of the notes of these chords are automatically snapped to the scale using the scale awareness feature in Ableton Live 12. And here in this simple chords, we have the ability to introduce a lower octave, And then basically we just have the ability to control the chance that a certain interval will occur every time we play a new note. By default, we have the third and the fifth. We can also add, say, an octave above. And then we have more kind of interesting notes, things like a fourth, seventh, and ninth. But where I find this is really cool is with these two different parameters here, the fold notes and the lowest notes, which basically just allows us to restrict the range within which these different notes are generated and also potentially make these notes not actually the intervals that they say they are. So let's reset this to, say, the triad and octave here, and let's start to fold some notes. And then change the lowest possible note. Let's introduce the octave below, and now let's just play a few notes, remembering that we are snapped to the key of G minor. And I'm playing different notes every single time here. And then lastly, we have the ability to strum through these notes. So a really cool, fun little device. Just remember that it does snap to the scale set using the scale awareness feature in Live 12. Next up, we have what I call note jumper, which is basically just a way to allow us to arpeggiate between octaves of a note really, really quickly, kind of like an 8-bit style. Then the next two are designed to kind of be used in tandem with one another. The first one basically just repeats the incoming notes at a certain rate. We can have this either synced to the tempo or free running using milliseconds. And then we can of course control the gate or the length of each note. And then this is really good when used in conjunction with the simple note chance, which basically just allows us to set the chance that a note will pass through the device. So for instance, if I set my note repeat here to eighth notes and decrease the note chance, you'll hear that not every note is actually played or passed through this note chance device. And this is really cool if you're creating more like generative things, for instance. And lastly, we do have the simple sequencer, which is again a free download that I have showcased in a previous video, which you can check out via the card above. But this just basically allows us to create an 8-step sequence, adjusting the pitch of each of the steps and the on or off of each of the steps as well. Now, I do plan on adding more racks and devices to this bundle, but of course, if you do get this now, you will get all those updates that I make to this for free as part of your purchase. But there you have it. That is the simple bundle. If you do decide to download and purchase it, I do hope you enjoy it. And don't forget that these racks will work in any edition of Ableton Live 12.1. You do need Ableton Live 12.1, but even if you have Lite, you'll be able to get full use of all of these racks. You'll find a link in the description to check out the simple bundle. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.